Hello and welcome to today's One Small Step virtual listening event. The One Small Step program brings together people with different political beliefs in order to listen to and connect with one another, so we can bridge our nation's political divides one conversation at a time. Locally, this event is brought to you by KUNR Public Radio and Noticiero Móvil, which is a bilingual digital media outlet serving Northern Nevada. Nevada Humanities is a key community partner for this initiative. I'm Natalie Van Hooser, a bilingual Spanish-English reporter and the Community Engagement Coordinator for KUNR Public Radio. Thanks so much for joining us. Right now, you're watching a recorded video premiere that we've put together to celebrate our station's partnership with StoryCorps for their One Small Step conversation program. You'll get to listen to audio pieces in English and Spanish created from these conversations. We've also included a behind-the-scenes look at what facilitating these conversations is like, as well as tips for how to go about having a discussion with someone you don't always agree with. After this video premiere, we'll have a Q&A session live in Zoom where you can ask members of my team and me anything you'd like to know about the program. You can also ask questions or leave comments in the Zoom chat during this video premiere. We also welcome questions and comments during this event in Spanish. También puede dejarnos sus preguntas o comentarios en español durante este evento. Over the past months, we've brought together residents of Northern Nevada and Eastern California, primarily strangers, with different political views, to interview one another in English or Spanish and discover what they have in common. Nationally, 6 different communities, roughly 300 people, took part in these conversations, including about 30 in our community so far. Let's take a look at what One Small Step has been like across the country.
What made you want to do this interview today?
Seems to me like we live in a time that people don't listen as well as perhaps they used to.
I live in a tiny village where there are about 50 or 60 people. I just kind of thought it'd be fun to see what people outside of the village sound like.
Hola, mi nombre es Diego Sarazúa. Nos encontramos en Nevada.
I live in Bakersfield, California.
And we're in beautiful Amarillo, Texas.
I get a lot of joy out of just conversations with people.
Well, you know what? I enjoy talking to people too. That's a real Oklahoma thing, isn't it?
I think it is.
Could you briefly describe in your own words your personal political values?
That's a loaded question, huh?
Yeah.
I would describe myself as a fiscally conservative person.
I'm definitely more liberal leaning.
I don't know. I don't even know if conservative means what conservative used to mean. I'm not even sure liberal means what it used to mean.
If we didn't know each other and I met you on the road and you had a flat tire and I'm going to help you, I have no care what your politics are.
Exactly. That's Kansas.
In Alaska, sometimes you got to humble yourself and say, hey, what's your perspective on this? Can you help me out?
We depend on one another up here.
Yeah.
I want to believe that people who maybe have different points of view still have the same end goals in life and can talk about things without being upset with each other. Was I who you expected me to be?
Yes and no. Like, you're more human than the archetype in my head, obviously.
Well, I'm glad.
Qué bonita tu historia. Gracias por todo eso.
I just really enjoyed this conversation, actually. So, I mean,
I have too.
This has been a great conversation. Thank you for making the time.
Yeah, Dan, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Hey, Nick, if you find yourself planning to be in the St. Albans area, give me a shout. Be glad to show you my orchards.
That would be awesome.
I am honored to have met you.
I will treasure this friendship. Thank you so much.
I hope that gave you a little taste of what these conversations happening in different communities sound and feel like. You may have spotted a few excerpts from Northern Nevada, one of them in Spanish. We're going to play that One Small Step conversation in Spanish for you right now with English subtitles. For some context, before you take a listen, you'll hear from Maria Davis and Diego Sarasua, two Reno residents who, for different reasons, moved from Mexico to Northern Nevada. They'll talk about their memories of Mexico, their passion for education, and their hopes for the future. Maria Davis is a professional Nevada certified court interpreter and volunteers in the community. She was registered as a Republican but has since registered as an independent. Diego Sarasua is a coordinator of research focused on the Latinx community in Northern Nevada and is a registered Democrat.
Creo que este proyecto es perfecto para el tiempo que estamos viviendo porque muchas veces el ambiente político nos ha dicho a algunos que no nos podemos comunicar de la misma manera, más que nada con gente que tal vez no tenga las mismas creencias que uno.
Aunque nosotros tenemos diferentes caminos para llegar al mismo propósito, pues debemos de respetar el hecho de que cada quien elija un camino diferente. Yo crecí en México, yo me vine acá cuando tenía 18 años, casi 19, yo llegué aquí el 10 de julio de 1989. Yo recuerdo que tendría tal vez unos 8 o 9 años la primera vez que yo asistí a un meeting, decimos. Entonces venían ciertos candidatos políticos y llevaban ciertas cosas para que las personas votaran por ellos, les daban lonches. Nosotros éramos muy pobres en ese ranchito, entonces llevaban así que despensas, que lonches, que no sé qué, sándwiches, nosotros decimos lonches. Entonces yo no entendía cómo es que lo que ellos prometían pudiera ser cierto. Digo, nosotros trabajamos tanto y esto es lo único que tenemos, ¿cómo va a ser cierto todo eso que va a ser gratis, no? Por ejemplo.
Bueno, me gusta mucho de que mencionas un poco de tu niñez, de tus primeras evidencias de lo que es la política. Y de hecho me gusta mucho que tus primeras evidencias que compartes no son de este país, porque tú como yo creo que nos hemos identificado como inmigrantes. Y aunque yo nunca viví en México, sí nací en Querétaro, México, a los 3 meses ya estaba aquí en el norte de Nevada, en una área rural, porque mi familia ya vivía aquí. Es muy difícil haber crecido así, ¿no? Entre dos culturas, y creo que como una persona que creció, de hecho, exactamente así, donde sus papás no siempre entendían el porqué, el valor del estudio. Llegó un tiempo ya que yo me mudé, me gradué un día en un pueblito aquí en las áreas rurales de Nevada, y al siguiente día me fui. O sea, a las pocas horas, yo creo que no hacía ni 24 horas de que me había graduado, porque tenía mucho miedo quedarme. Yo soy el más pequeño de 5 hombres, y entendí que mis papás habían hecho lo mejor que ellos podían. Y si me pudiera decir uno o dos tal vez de las personas más influyentes en su vida y qué le enseñaron.
Mi mamá, mi madre, mi héroe, mi todo. Mi mamá siempre fue el impulso para todo, el ejemplo para todo. Perdón. Siempre nos enseñó que por los hijos se sacrifica todo.
Muchas gracias por compartir.
Claro que sí.
¿Cómo es que categorizas involucrarse y hacer escuchar la voz de uno en la política?
En la política. La primera vez cuando yo me registré para votar, me registré como en el Partido Republicano porque yo leí lo que representaba cada uno y dije, pues esto es lo que me enseñó mi mamá, o sea, claro, ¿no? Uh-huh. Y entonces, a través de los años, yo he visto que estamos en un lugar un poco diferente. De repente estoy yo ahí, quiero hablar de otras situaciones, quiero que me entiendan las personas que ya están dentro de esa reunión y automáticamente asumen que yo quiero hablar de inmigración. Uh-huh. Automáticamente asumen que yo quiero hablar del muro, de qué sé yo, ¿no? Uh-huh. Entonces, yo quiero hablar de todo.
Tenemos que mencionar por igual que hay mucha gente como usted y como yo, que somos inmigrantes a este país, que tenemos todavía esa esperanza de que vamos a ver un líder en nuestra comunidad, un líder político que nos entienda, que entienda del trabajo, que por igual entienda de ese lente que nosotros vemos de política, donde en México todavía vemos mucho de esos aguinaldos, ¿no? De ese lonche, de esas promesas que se hacen al pueblo y que nosotros pensábamos que solamente pasaba allá, ¿no? no nos conocíamos, pero yo y tú nunca tuvimos la oportunidad de conocernos tanto como nos hemos conocido en esta entrevista.
Yo no te conocía como líder y me ha dado mucho gusto conocerte.
Igualmente, gracias.
Gracias.
So now you've heard an edited excerpt from a One Small Step conversation. We'd love to hear your reactions and what you think via the chat. If you've got questions you'd like us to answer during the Q&A at the end, go ahead and submit those using the Q&A function. You'll get to listen to a conversation in English in just a little while. Next up, we're going to pull back the curtain and show you what goes into making these conversations happen. My colleague Maria Palma and I sat down with Stephanie Gibson from Nevada Humanities to get into the details. Take a look.
Stephanie Gibson is the Assistant Director of Nevada Humanities, a community partner with the One Small Step Conversation Program. Recently, Stephanie sat down with facilitators Natalie Van Hooser and Maria Palma to talk about their experiences working on the One Small Step program so far.
You guys are going to have to break it down a little bit more for me. What does it really mean to facilitate a One Small Step conversation? Perhaps you can talk a little bit about the goals of the program and give us a bit of a behind the scenes look at this process of getting people together to talk.
Yeah, definitely. So unlike the traditional StoryCorps format, if you are familiar with StoryCorps already, you might think of a conversation where two people who know each other pretty well get together and have a pretty intimate conversation. That might be family members or a teacher and a student, different types of combinations of people who have a relationship. And One Small Step really takes that model and it flips it on its head, because One Small Step is inviting people to sign up to have a conversation with someone they don't know, and that other person is probably going to have some differences, both politically and ideologically. We also do look at matching people for conversations who have something in common too, so you have some common ground from which you can build and really start connecting. But that really is the premise of the program, is we're looking for matching people, and we're really looking at what some of those differences might be. So we're evaluating those signups, and then we're calling people to really get a sense of what they'd like to get out of the program. And then we go from there with scheduling two people for one of these conversations, which is either virtual or in person, depending on preference. And even though we're journalists, during these conversations, we're really a fly on the wall. As a facilitator, our goal is to be there to help make sure everything runs smoothly and to answer any questions, operate the tech, and take some notes for the archive. But really the point is to have that conversation flowing between the two participants. So we're not there to interview anyone. And so that's a little bit different about our model of how this works. And we're really there to just encourage the most thoughtful, relaxed conversation possible, and to help everyone feel like they're in the space and ready to do that, to make sure it's a worthwhile experience.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So it sounds like the outreach and the work to prep folks is not uncomplicated, but the premise of One Small Step is uncomplicated in that it's about getting people together. And I think we all have the instinct that if we could just do this more, there'd be less polarization, there'd be more, perhaps even more consensus, or at least at the very least, a little bit more understanding. So can you both talk about a little bit how community members feel after their conversations are over, when people do sign up to participate in One Small Step? How has it been going? What are you noticing? What are their reactions like?
Right, definitely. Well, after the conversation is over, and it's a 50-minute conversation, but we have time at the beginning where we answer questions, get everyone comfortable. Then the participants talk, and then at the end, we go over releasing the conversation for the archive if anyone has any questions. But before we get into all that nitty-gritty after the conversation, the first thing we like to ask is, how was the experience for you? How did this go today? And overwhelmingly, what I've been seeing is a pretty encouraging response that people were surprised how much they had in common with their partner. Even when we're really intentionally trying to find some differences when we make these matches, once they start talking and you hear a little bit about the life experiences that have shaped someone's perspective on the world, you do start to find those commonalities, whether that's with your upbringing or maybe some kind of religious crossover or some kind of trauma that you've experienced in your life and your partner is able to relate. So there is that element, which I think is encouraging to see. And also, the participants at that point expressed that they were glad they did it. Like they probably had some nerves at the beginning, is what I hear a lot of the time. You know, I was a little nervous going into this, or I talked to my family because I wasn't sure how I'd answer some of these questions. But afterwards, you know, they found it to be a stimulating conversation and they're glad they took the time. And we do recognize that it's really, we do appreciate everyone taking the time to do this because everyone has so much going on. And a lot of the time, my favorite part is when I hear people say that they'd like to continue the conversation after the recording is over. And so sometimes that means people are exchanging phone numbers because they want to grab a beer together and keep chatting, or get dinner with their families, or even just stay connected on social media. So the fact that this conversation can result in a ripple effect of having more dialogue going forward is the most encouraging thing I see.
I feel like in some occasions, one small step is a way to break the ice between like two persons that didn't know each other. So for example, when we are about to conduct an interview or a conversation, I think, oh, these people might be friends in real life. Like we had a pair, two Mexican girls that come from Mexico here to study or to work. So about the same age, like 25, 26. And it's like, they don't know each other, but they knew each other in the conversation. So it's like, you know, they can potentially be actual friends. And they can use one small step as the way that they can meet. So I agree that at the beginning it's a little bit overwhelming, you know, to sit down, especially in person interviews, because you have the microphone and you have this like all table set up for the conversation with like papers and cards. And it's like, wow, what is this? But then when we start reading the rules or the program and saying, hey, this is like a really informal conversation and we're going to help you formulate the questions. It's not like you have to talk and you know, like, because it's hard to talk to someone for the first time. So the good thing about this program is that we actually provide some kickoff questions so the person can feel comfortable. So you know, at the beginning, yeah, they are nervous and we are nervous too as facilitators because we don't know how they're gonna react or how they're gonna respond. But when it's like, I don't know, like 30 minutes into the conversation, I feel like everything just, you know, every fear is gone. And then it's just all about, you know, wow, I wanna know more about this person. And sometimes, yeah, like Natalie said, sometimes people want to know more and want to connect outside the program. So I feel like that's a really nice opportunity that it doesn't seem like that at the beginning, but at the end, it looks like, wow, yeah, this is like a program that probably we all need to meet a person that we don't know and just like, you know, nothing else, like not just meeting a person, and I'm gonna dedicate like 90 minutes to meet a person. And I think that's so nice to dedicate our time because we are so busy sometimes that we just don't want to have a chat with someone. So like actually dedicate those minutes to another person that you don't know. It's like, I feel like that's an act of like humanity.
What did you think? Is there anything else you'd like to know about what it's like to conduct the outreach or facilitate these conversations? Let us know in the chat now or during the time at the end. If all this facilitation talk made you curious to hear what more of these conversations sound like, that's what we're going to do now. We've got a piece in English for you this time with Spanish subtitles. I recorded this conversation this year on the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. The two Reno residents who joined me had never met before. Don Harner is a local correctional officer who says he believes in small government and sensible restrictions. His conversation partner was Amy Akeo, who recently started an Asian American and Pacific Islander outreach committee for the Washoe County Democratic Party. Together, they remembered what it was like to hear the news that the Twin Towers had fallen.
So, Don, my question about today that I wanted to ask you was, do you remember where you were or how you found out about 9/11?
I do. I was working state corrections for juveniles. I was getting ready for work and seeing it on the TV. I still can't believe it. It's just absolutely such a shocking thing to witness.
Yeah, I remember I was in college. I went to class that day. I remember my teacher saying, it was a European history class, and she said, we'll just talk about the history that's unfolding. I was so scared. Every year for the last 20 years on this day, I still remember that feeling.
We were all feeling vulnerable and wondering what happened and who was at fault. And I imagine that's got to touch home, with your ancestry, the same way folks were feeling after Pearl Harbor. America reacted with, let's intern the Japanese. We get to look back at it and go, well, that was bad. But at the time, how prevalent was that fear and that quick to jump to conclusions?
It's funny that you say that about Pearl Harbor, because I said that. I was like, this must be how people felt. But my dad, he spent his childhood in the internment camp. He was 5. He had no idea what was happening, just that they had to leave the farm in California. But that's not something that my family really talked about, or my dad never wanted to talk about it. My grandpa he loved talking about it. He looked at 5-year-old or 6-year-old Amy and was like, oh, I have to tell you everything. Of course, he also thought I could speak Japanese, and I used to tell him, Grandpa, I don't understand Japanese, and he would say, oh, sure you do. I just thought it was kind of interesting how the older generation wanted to talk about it, but then my dad's generation, the younger generation, didn't want to talk about it at all.
That certainly makes sense. I think the talking about it is good because I don't think it's anything we should ever forget. Almost like today, my youngest daughter doesn't remember the events of 9/11 and the towers coming down. My oldest, she was pretty young, so there's a vague recollection. We would talk about it, but the next generation won't. I mean, it doesn't mean anything to my youngest daughter. It may as well be Watergate or the Kennedy assassination or, one of these things that our parents talked about. I hope young people learn what a profound impact that was, the towers coming down and how that affected America.
So what did you make of this interview with Don and Amy? Did you find their conversation surprising in any way? Let us know in the chat. We're looking forward to talking about it at the end of the program too. We're approaching the end of our One Small Step listening event video premiere. Before we get into the live discussion, I'd like to leave you with some advice for how to go about having conversations with friends, family, and other people in the community who might have different political values than you. Now, we'll be tuning into a segment from a virtual salon event hosted by Nevada Humanities. The event happened in October and was called Learning How to Listen. Local experts in conversation and compromise joined with me for a round of tips and tricks. Enjoy.
On October 13th, Nevada Humanities held a virtual program with One Small Step called Learning How to Listen. The event featured Margaret Crowley, a mediator and conflict resolution trainer. David Gamble Jr., a deputy public defender with the Washoe County Public Defender's Office. Natalie Van Hooser, a journalist and coordinator of One Small Step. And Catherine Schweitzer, Ph.D., a political philosopher with a specialty in constitutional compromise. This event was moderated by Eloisa Gordon-Mora, Ph.D., the University Diversity Inclusion Officer at the University of Nevada, Reno. The event was focused on how to have difficult conversations and how to listen to people when they may have different perspectives from you.
We have 1 minute left, but because we want our audience to have some pearl of wisdom as a final takeaway, if you could give us one piece of advice on how to engage in difficult conversations, whether with friends, family, or general unknown individuals, and on misinformation. Catherine.
If you're talking to someone on the phone who's a family member, put yourself on mute so that you can listen and pause before you respond.
Thank you. David.
Do not be overly confrontational. Try to keep things light. I've had conversations with people who vehemently disagreed with me, who were a bit rude to me, but because I kept my demeanor light and even, they walked away thinking it was a great conversation. And so that's a win, I think.
Thank you. Natalie.
Yeah, in addition to really trying to just ground things in your experience, I think what I find really helpful either as a facilitator or a participant in these types of conversations is really to focus on that tone and the pacing. Like if we can just remember to breathe, to like slow down if we can, that really will help everything. So, even like if we're talking about physical spaces, like we've talked about with One Small Step, the lighting can be really important. Try to put some like nice warm light in that space, make things a little less harsh. So thinking about your environment too.
Thank you. And to close it off, Margaret.
Don't engage as if it has to be, I'm right, you're wrong. Again, go back to that curiosity, that, what brought you to that view, and be willing to persuade, yet be persuaded.
That was just a small portion of a larger conversation about the value of dialogue, given the political and pandemic environment that we're all navigating. If you'd like to listen to the full event, I encourage you to visit nevadahumanities.org/salons. And remember, we're still accepting signups for our local One Small Step program. Have a conversation in English or Spanish with another resident of Northern Nevada or Eastern California, either virtually or in person. To sign up, you can go to the homepage of kunr.org. This experience allows you to contribute to bridging political divides in our community through dialogue. You can also listen to full One Small Step conversations at archive.storycorps.org. And finally, I'd like to give a shout out to our funders, team, and community supporters. StoryCorps' One Small Step is made possible in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people. On the local level, I also want to thank Nevada Humanities for being a key community partner for this initiative. If you'd like to see what programming is coming up with Nevada Humanities, check out nevadahumanities.org. Last but not least, thank you to the teams at KUNR Public Radio and Noticiero Móvil behind our One Small Step work. This event will be on our KUNR Public Radio and Noticiero Móvil Facebook pages as a recording if you'd like to refer to it later. I'm Natalie Van Hooser. Thanks for watching and stay healthy.